On this episode, we give our Night of Champions predictions, talk about NXT Takeover Fatal 4-Way, Raw being stale, and favorite markout moments now on Byte That. Welcome everybody to episode 56 of Byte That, the semi-somewhat maybe international professional wrestling podcast where we talk about the ups and downs of that which we love. There we go. Which is all about that bass. And for everybody listening, thanks for hitting that download button, checking out the podcast. Remember, you can check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ByteThatCast to get the podcast, as well as iTunes and Stitcher. And if you like it, hit subscribe, tell your friends. It really goes a long way in supporting us. My name is Juan Villas. I am from San Juan, by the way of Puerto Rico. And as always, I'm joined by the Byte That cast. First, all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, Ryan McNulty.
156 episodes strong, so I'm here whether you like it or not.
Perfect attendance, brother. That's why I love you. And somebody else that I kind of love, all the way from the Double F in Manitoba, Keith Poshik.
Juan, I got the boom boom that all the boys chase and all the right junk in all the right place.
Ooh, that sounds sexy, sir. We got to talk after the podcast. So somehow, we need to get all down and dirty talking about professional wrestling, particularly Raw. We're just a couple of days away from WWE Night of Champions, which is going to be available, obviously, on the WWE Network for you know how much. But you know what? I'm just going to cut this intro crap right now. I'm just going to get down to it. What the hell's happening, guys? I mean, seriously.
On the topic of crap, Raw happened.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've sort of been trying to play devil's advocate for the past couple of episodes, with the exception of last week's Raw, which was decent, but it's just, like, seriously, what is going on? It's like they're not trying. Once again, we usually try to play devil's advocate, but there comes a point where you just have to go, you know what? 3 hours a week, man. 3 hours of our time is going to waste.
Exactly. And this, in the grand scheme of things, should have been an important Raw. Not only is it the go-home show for Night of Champions, but really it was their last chance to try and get subs for the WWE Network.
That's true. This is leading up to their pay-per-view, their last pay-per-view before their renewal kicks in, if I'm not mistaken. And this was probably one of the worst go-home shows before pay-per-view that I've seen. I mean, if we're looking back at the past 4 Raws, 3 out of 4 were terrible. Just outright bad. Last week's was pretty darn good. I wouldn't call it great. So, I mean, that's really not a good track record leading up to what's supposed to be one of their most important pay-per-views because of this network subscription renewal. And I wouldn't be surprised if subscriptions go down after the next quarter.
And I mean, realistically, last week's was all right, but it was really good in comparison to the last few weeks. It was a decent Raw with one amazing segment.
No, and think about this. We have had an entire month, okay? An entire month of this whole, I really hope Raw's good. 3, 6, 9 hours of worth of wrestling content that hasn't really been good. And last week's Raw, let's, think about it. Maybe, like a good hour, 45 minutes of it was really good. So almost over 10 hours, guys, we're talking in a month. I mean, in any other TV show, like, for example, I used to watch Walking Dead, Lost. Whenever they got to those points where, even for like 2 episodes, I didn't like it, I'd stop watching. Yet we as wrestling fans just sort of try and consume this. So I want to ask you guys, just sort of, are we just being too negative or just what's going on?
In a lot of ways, wrestling fans put up with a lot more crap than most other television viewers. I mean, if you look at the quality of show on a lot of these Raws, most of it is not that good. You don't see a lot of people sticking around with many other shows when the quality dips that low.
I mean, it always comes back to the joke of, as wrestling fans, we are in the great abusive relationship where we just get beaten and broken and then just keep coming back for more and more and more.
Yeah, I think it's time I bring up this very poetic comment somebody left on the subreddit Squirt Circle, which we frequently browse. This comes from VIPOSHIK. Warshawski. And he writes, WWE wasted our time tonight, given that ass crack smelling swamp ghoul Bray Wyatt time to hypnotize to the WWE Universe with his usual mumbo gumbo. His beard looks so dirty, it looks like he didn't even wash his beard. Tonight, Big Show looked taller than ever, and for a guy that size, he is also spry and fit with the trim belly of a man his size. If Big Show went to my high school, he would be by far the biggest and coolest boy on the entire team. We know Big Show always has a distinct power advantage over rival superstars, but against a flabby goon like Bray Wyatt, he also has a speed advantage. When Bray Wyatt running away from Big Show and sitting in that grandpa chair he always brags about, you could see the wussy in his eyes. You can tell when he is out of breath because it stops smelling like a sewer when he opens his mouth. Bray Wyatt can talk big, but deep in his drug addict heart, he knows he was afraid to lose tonight, and that's why he called his panic gang, the Wyatt family, to try to hook mitts on Big Show. Bray Wyatt thinks he's smarter than the WWE Universe, but the truth is, we are smarter than him. I hear old man Wyatt went to the doctor office for an IQ test, and then it came back negative. But an even bigger negative will be the Sunday Night of Champions, because come Sunday, the Big Show will subtract Bray Wyatt from the WWE permanently. Signed, Warshawski.
I don't feel bad for wrestling fans anymore. I take everything I said back.
At least somebody is into that feud. that's pretty
I guess
much
so.
all I'm gonna say about that.
So you can get as creative as Warshawski, or you can also get as real as a Mets fan forever. So he wrote, I'm actually angry at this. I shouldn't be. It's not worth it, and I'm not even watching Raw. I am actually watching the game, referencing NFL. I just wanted to see if they actually meant the actual halftime of the game. They did. I didn't think I would get angry. I don't really care about WWE right now, but that just pissed me off to no end. This is, of course, in reference to the kind of infamous segment where John Cena was calling out Brock Lesnar, threatening Paul Heyman, and basically saying, I'll see you at halftime, and if Brock Lesnar's not coming out, then I'm going to kick your ass, Heyman. That was just odd, just so bizarre, so weird, and I know the NFL was there, but Jeebus, could you make us care about your product even less? Is that possible? How did you guys think about that?
It was completely absurd. At first, when he said halftime, I was just kind of confused. It didn't even register in my mind. And I watched the NFL, and it didn't kind of click with me. But I found out, the next day, today, that when they said halftime, they meant actually halftime. So, I mean, you could almost think of maybe one of the reasons that the show was even on the poor side is because they basically got the game on a monitor somewhere, and they're trying to time their live TV show around the other, around a football game, seeing when they go to halftime, because it doesn't necessarily always happen around the same time. So, I mean, that's just crazy in and of itself. And like a lot of people were commenting and saying is that they're just kind of giving up, just conceding to the fact that, oh, you're gonna watch the game, but at least come back to us for this one segment. But you know what? After that segment, we're not even gonna give you a reason to stay. Go back and watch your game, because we don't give a shit.
Exactly. And when they said halftime, I assumed that they meant like halfway through the show, like somewhere between like the middle of the second hour. But no. It's crazy. You said it best, Ryan. They're giving up, and that's exactly what that felt like.
And if anything, if you've been keeping up with any of the news, the NFL has had a lot of issues with players in the league recently. Like, the league is completely under fire for possibly ignoring evidence or something in this Ray Rice case, and then there's the Adrian Peterson thing going on. There's a lot of bad publicity for the NFL right now. You would think that the WWE would try and capitalize on this, try and be the better brand. Obviously their wrestlers get into trouble too, but I don't think to the extent that a lot of these NFL guys do. They could paint a much better picture for themselves, and this is like a time to capitalize on it, and instead they're just conceding.
No, and it's bad in almost every way, shape, and form because once again, much like promoting the WWE Network for $9.99, the ones that are subscribed we get penalized. The same thing happened here because, for example, I don't watch football. I don't watch NFL. So when you say halftime, much like Keith, I think, oh, halfway during the show. So it sort of makes me lose track of what's really happening. And then it seems just like, okay, so nothing else is going to happen. That's it. Because it almost felt like, I remember when we were watching together, Keith, you almost thought Raw ended because of the way it concluded. You saw John Cena, it was the perfect hype scenario for Raw to fade out. Instead, we got a whole other hour on top of it.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, it felt really weird, and not looking at the clock, I'm like, oh, is this Raw or is this the end of Raw? But no, it wasn't. But now with that lens, it just makes so much sense.
They're just trying to get a big rating for that particular segment, which really showed, because that segment seemed to be the only thing the writers maybe seemed to give a shit about, because everything else was pretty poorly written. I mean, we've seen a lot of scripts and stuff leak. So we've kind of seen that a lot of these promos and stuff we see are virtually 100% scripted. And I think that really shined through in someone like Seth Rollins' promo this week, which I thought, was pretty terrible. I wouldn't put it all on Rollins. I just think the writing was bad. So, I mean, they really just wanted this one segment and hoped that people watching Monday Night Football would tune in for that, and then just threw together one of the worst endings to Raw ever.
Yeah, it personally left me feeling like if the WWE doesn't care, why should I care and invest 3 hours of my life every Monday?
It's like between this and just the constant shilling of the WWE Network, it's coming off as
there's a song now.
Desperate like, and pathetic.
Goddamn.
That's what the company, if I was to describe WWE in 2 words, it would be desperate and pathetic right now.
And I think those 2 words really do symbolize a lot. And it's unfortunate because I mentioned like 2 weeks ago, the reactions to Raw were getting really bad. But they're getting so bad to the point where people are just flat out going, you know what? I tuned out halfway during Raw. You know what? I only tuned in for that one segment. Think about it. You guys have both said, we as wrestling fans are prone to sort of, going back or being very forgiving. We're getting to the point where people are legitimately just flat out not watching, because we don't have that edginess. Instead, hey, how do we end Raw? We end Raw with the Patriot segment between Mark Henry and Rusev to hype up Night of Champions. How awesome was that?
Our silence dictates everything. That was basically the segment you expect to see at the top of the 10 o'clock hour, where it's usually their garbage segment. I mean, it was so typical and so bland and just nothing interesting about it. And a lot of people comment, whether it's on Twitter or Squared Circle or anything like that, there's a huge international audience that you're just completely alienating with this, and that's how you're going to end Raw before what's supposed to be a big pay-per-view.
I mean, not only that, but I think the even crazier thing about that main event was that it went on after Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns, which I might add is a match at Night of Champions that they just gave away for free. And it wasn't even the main event.
Yeah, almost none of this made sense. It's just, I mean, we'll definitely talk about it more as we give our Night of Champions predictions. But, when we talk about that main event segment between Mark Henry and Rusev, it almost feels like I've been watching the Monday Night War on WWE Network. I think you've watched it too, Keith, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, and at one of the episodes, they essentially talk about, how WWE was doing very traditional characters, and that's why the ratings went down. But then you hear about Stephanie, Triple H, Vince McMahon going like, yeah, we needed to top, the week after. Vince Russo was talking about that. Everybody, like just that hunger. But it almost seems like we're practically, ironically, I watched a documentary from these very same people, but the current product basically dictates they're repeating that which made them fail.
Yeah, I've kind of been saying it for a while, but wrestling needs a new war, because WWE is kind of slowly falling into that comfortable place again, like you were mentioning. And they're not really going outside their boundaries because there's nobody to push them. I mean, really, even with NXT, it makes them a lot more comfortable because now even that's where all the guys are starting out. And that's almost like the new place to be, and then WWE is on top of it, kind of making WWE untouchable in the process. But they're forcing you to feel it.
What they fail to realize is, having a WCW isn't the only competition that Monday Night Raw has. Anything else that's on 9 p.m. on Mondays is competition for Raw. Any activity possible is competition for Monday Night Raw. Just because there isn't another wrestling company to motivate them to do better doesn't mean that people won't turn to something else. It doesn't even have to be Monday Night Football. I could just decide I'd rather play a video game than watch Monday Night Raw. So they really would be stupid to just let the quality of the show slide just because people who watch wrestling happen to be a little bit more dedicated than most television audiences.
It almost brings up a very controversial question, which is WWE killing themselves by trying to be the best product? I say this because I love reading up a lot about business and all that. And nowadays, 2014, a lot of businesses are failing because they've grown to the point where they can actually only go down. Because, the economy, all this stuff is happening. But, say Breaking Bad's competing with another show. Breaking Bad doesn't buy the other show. It's still its own show. With WWE, you can buy the product you're going up against. But the problem is, there's no real incentive to pick between wrestling shows. You had ECW, WCW, and WWE. Right now, you have either WWE or independents, which are a little bit harder to keep track of in, TNA, which, with its whole situation. So did WWE put themselves in a spot where they can only go down from here? Like they actually have to, maybe even go back down to being a territorial thing just because of the budget situation, or even like the whole WWE Network situation where apparently they may be selling the library to Warner Brothers. Like there's a lot of stuff going on.
I think it's interesting you bring up the whole territory example because it's kind of history repeating itself if you think about it. Vince McMahon bought up all the competition, and he was the one house that was around until WCW and ECW and all of them came around to kind of take him out of his comfort zone. And this lull could kind of feel like that WWF at that time.
I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily like it's grown too big for itself. Well, I mean, it has in a way that they've obviously had to make budget cuts and stuff, but we may never see another boom like the Attitude Era again, but it's clear that they could still maintain a show and people will stick around if the product is good. I mean, the ratings were pretty decent during this whole Ruthless Aggression era when WCW was gone. And they maintained steady ratings. They usually didn't have anything too bad. But I mean, if you've looked over the years, more and more people have just dropped off. I mean, what do they get now for a Raw rating? Like 2 point something?
2.8,
I mean,
2.9.
Those were the ratings SmackDown used to get. We used to see Raw getting in the high 3 point whatevers, sometimes a 4 on a good day, and just, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So now it's, maybe people's just interest in the product is slowly declining, or maybe they're not doing anything to keep people interested.
And obviously it's a very great topic because, I mean, we're wrestling fans. Think of how much time we consume with this. So for those listening, please let us know, do you think that WWE is doomed to fail out of its own growth, or if this is just sort of a temporary thing?
And let me just say this because, after a good Raw, we're all gushing and all that. It's really, it's just the fickleness of being a wrestling fan. Is after, a few bad Raws, it's like we're all like, this company needs to do all this. They need to just uproot everything and start over.
Yeah.
And then go back and listen to us last summer. We're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, there, WrestleMania, I already see what's going to happen.
Don't go back and listen to us.
As
please.
we sucked back then. But, the deal is, we're one good Raw away from being back on the positive side, which just shows that they have the power to keep us interested, but they're just choosing to use their powers for evil instead of good.
We want to love. That's our problem. We want to love it so much, but it just hurts us so bad. And it just happens over and over.
Yeah, so maybe after Night of Champions, everything sort of kicks back into gear. However, before we go into the Night of Champions predictions, I actually do want to bring up a little bit of a fun tidbit. You know, we got to talk about positive things. It's been a very negative thing. So talking about that segment between John Cena and Paul Heyman, once again, I got to keep bringing it up. Paul Heyman always knocks it out of the park. Obviously, the fact that his client is Brock Lesnar really goes a long way into supporting this. And I sort of wanted to ask you guys, do you think that Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman are arguably one of the greatest teams, you know, in terms of manager and wrestler in wrestling history?
I think it's a definitive and solid yes. A great team is made up by if the other person compensates for the other person's weakness. And that's exactly what Paul Heyman and Brock Lesnar is. Brock Lesnar's not very good on the microphone, but he's the most intimidating mofo in the WWE. Now, Paul Heyman is amazing on the microphone, but not very intimidating. So if you put them together, if they were to do the fusion dance, you would have the most intimidating mofo that is amazing on the microphone. And that's why they're such a great team.
Keith Pushik, ladies and gentlemen, the first man to say mofo since 2002.
Mofos.com, don't Google it.
Can anyone name drop some other great pairings? Because I really, off the top of my head,
Bobby Heenan and Andre the Giant. That was a really good one for the exact same reason.
I mean, even Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, there's so many things.
Yeah.
And the great thing is that a lot of people almost forget, who did Brock Lesnar come into the company with? Paul Heyman. So it's not a one-shot deal. This has happened twice. First, when he was the next big thing, and then now when he was already established and he dominates the company. So it's not just that they're a great pairing, is that over a decade after, they can still get teamed up and they can still be awesome, if not more, than when they first came in.
Well, arguably, I would say they've used their pairing a lot better in recent years than they did back then. How long did Heyman actually stay around as Lesnar's manager? I felt like it wasn't that long back in his first run.
Well, even after that, when Paul Heyman was the general manager of SmackDown, he straight up said he is going to build this show around Brock Lesnar in kayfabe. So even though he wasn't his manager at the time, he was still Brock Lesnar's hype guy.
Yeah, because at that point he came in with Brock Lesnar, then he turned on him in Survivor Series 2003, I want to say.
Yeah, 3 against the Big Show,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was before the whole general manager thing, and that's when Brock Lesnar did, sort of show a little bit more personality with his feuds like Eddie Guerrero and all that, but just such a great team. And for those listening, it's hard to just sort of come up with so many teams, so many pairings, I guess you could say. So let us know which ones you think could really stand the test of time and not have one successful run, but two that revolutionized. I mean, think about the fact that Brock Lesnar, beat The Rock, beat Hulk Hogan, beat everybody in a short amount of time, and Paul Heyman's presence really, really helped him out in the long run. So now that we have that out of the way, I think it's time we really do talk about our Night of Champions predictions. The show's going to be up this Sunday. It's got a couple of matches, sir, so what you say we get down to the nitty-gritty predictions segment.
Oh,
Sounds good.
Okay, so obviously we never know the order. However, something we do know is that in the pre-show, there's actually going to be a peep show in the pre-show with Christian interviewing Y2J. Now, there's been a lot of rumors that this may be his last hurrah, as he himself has pointed out. So, do you expect anything from this pre-show interview?
It would be interesting if on Christian's show that Jericho maybe announced, granted he hinted towards the last hurrah, maybe he announces that this is his last match. I don't know. Or maybe that just he's taking time off. Either way, it's probably going to be something about him either going away or finishing up his career possibly.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Riveting.
Yeah.
Keith, very riveting.
I mean, you said everything that needed to be said. I'm sorry. I was agreeing. My apologies.
No, it really is a nice incentive because it's on the pre-show, so maybe, it's a really good way to just go like, oh, I gotta watch this match with Randy Orton. But first off, WWE Tag Team Championship. The Usos are the champions, taking on the team of Gold and Stardust. We know about this whole sudden heel turn they had. They injured the Usos, so this is sort of the revenge match. Who do you see coming out the winner?
I'm going to go with the Usos. I think this might do Gold and Stardust losing. We're still all expecting that Cody Rhodes Goldust feud coming down the line. I think this might be the start of that. So I'm going to go with the Usos retaining because I do think the Ascension will be the one to finally dethrone them whenever the hell they come in.
See, I'm going with Gold and Stardust on this one because I think, especially how they can, if the Usos lose, they can blame it on the injury angle, and then Gold and Stardust can lose the return match, and then it lead to that. I feel like Gold and Stardust picking up the win here makes more sense in my brain.
Well, in my brain, I'm actually going to go with Mr. McNulty and pick the Usos, simply because, whenever that brother feud happens, it just makes sense.
You sound like Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, no, but it makes sense because it's going to be like, you know what? We injured these guys and we still couldn't win. So one brother can easily blame the other. Usos come out looking strong. And the Usos, they look like more of a legit champions. It's almost like, you can injure them. You can do anything. They come out the winners. Ascension comes in, which, by the way, the Ascension actually wrestled the main event last week. So anything's possible.
I would love for Hulk Hogan to commentate that match because you get a brother and a brother versus a brother and a brother. And there's just so many brothers in there that Hulk Hogan would have.
And Brother Love
the greatest.
Is, guest announcer.
And Brother Love is guest referee or something. That would be hilarious.
Okay, so coming up next, WWE Divas Championship match. Paige taking on AJ Lee, taking on Nikki Bella. It's been a very controversial development with this match. Anything is really possible. So I'm going to take it over first to you, Mr. Poshik.
Saying development for this match is a bit of a stretch, first of all. And my prediction is Paige for this one. I think it's going to be some sort of Bella screws Bella, and Paige picks up the win.
I think Keith's onto something here because, they actually never ended up putting Brie Bella into that match. So obviously she's going to get involved in some way. I'm going to go with Paige retaining, but I wouldn't be surprised if AJ won either. But I feel like if they're going to have Brie Bella interfering in there, they're not going to try and take away the glory if AJ wins it. So it probably makes more sense to just have Paige retain it.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I agree with you 100%. So going on to the amazing match that had a closing segment on Raw. Mark Henry taking on Rusev. Who do you see winning, Keith?
Honestly, I don't care. Moving on.
All right, I'm going to say that Rusev still wins this because even though I haven't clicked the latest report yet, I saw something about them wanting to have John Cena feud with Rusev. So if anyone's going to beat Rusev, it's got to be our knight in shining armor, Mr. John Cena.
Yes, I agree. Rusev wins for Russia. And that's all I got to say about that.
Tetris, Vladimir Putin, vodka, moving on.
Oh my. Okay, so WWE Intercontinental Championship. We got the champion, Dolph Ziggler, not his stunt double, Art Ziggler, taking on The Miz. So this is actually one of the nicer mid-card feuds we've had in the past couple of weeks, or pretty much ever, and within the past 5 years almost. So who do you guys see coming out the winner?
I think Dolph Ziggler is going to retain it, but I hope in my heart of hearts there's a moment in this match where both of them call in their stunt doubles, and then it turns into Damien Sandow versus R-Truth for a bit.
I was actually going to say the exact same thing. I was hoping for a double twin magic in R-Truth beats Sandow and Ziggler retains.
I don't even care who wins. That needs to happen right now. See, that's the problem with wrestling.
And the ref shouldn't be able to tell the difference, too.
Even the commentators, they should just play it off like, yeah, it's happening. The match ends, they all act completely neutral. So, Ryan, do you care who wins then?
Well, I said I think Ziggler will probably retain, but either one could happen. I'm fine with it.
I'm actually going to go with The Miz. I think that they're not going to be too afraid to change the championships as long as this feud keeps happening, especially with the whole stunt double thing, so I'm actually going to be rooting for The Miz. Now, United States Championship match, Sheamus taking on Cesaro, a feud that almost started with the WWE 2K15 panel, has definitely shown a new version of Cesaro, and obviously he carries forward his beautiful theme song, so who do you see coming out the winner?
I'm going to go with Sheamus retaining, just because he's Sheamus and he seems to win a lot of matches. I think it's going to be a great match either way, but I see Sheamus keeping the belt.
Mm-hmm. And to continue your analogy, Juan, you could say that this feud showed us a little more of Sheamus than we've seen before.
Too many lines.
But I'm going to go with Sheamus as well, because Sheamus wins LOL.
No, I think what's going to happen is that Cesaro is going to play his theme song during the match to the point where Sheamus just goes
Explodes.
a little crazy. Yeah, exactly. And then gets censored, becomes the champion. So, yeah, I think Cesaro wins.
Yeah, if there was any time a situation where entrance music would distract a wrestler and make him lose a match, it would be Cesaro's theme.
Definitely. So let's see what happens there. Now, this is interesting because we just got this match on Raw. We got Roman Reigns taking on Seth Rollins. Considering Roman Reigns won, who do you see coming out the winner, Keith?
Side note, how crazy would it be if this match goes on after Mark Henry versus Rusev when it was the complete opposite on Raw? But I don't think there's going to be a winner to this match. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. It'd be... Maybe I'm looking a little too deep into it, but it'd feel weird if there was 2 clean finishes in a row, because that doesn't happen anymore.
The winner of this match will be Dean Ambrose.
Yeah, pretty much. I think everybody expected. I think they just got the match over with on Raw so that people sort of suspect Dean Ambrose is going to come back. However, if he doesn't, that's really going to suck. So it's going to be a disqualification. Now, we could be seeing the last hurrah from this man. It's Y2J Chris Jericho taking on the Viper Randy Orton in what is one of the most underwhelmingly built feuds for Night of Champions. So Keith, you go first, bro.
I think it's going to be Y2J on this one. And even though it's been an insanely underwhelming build-up, like you said, I'm going to say this one is going to be the match of the night. Because it's Jericho's last hurrah, and we both know Jericho can go and Orton can go, so I think they're going to put on a really good match in the process.
You know, the build-up to this was just horrendous. It was, okay, Randy Orton just attacks Chris Jericho.
It was Wrestling Feud
room.
101, basically.
But it wasn't even that. It was literally, okay, how do we get these guys to feud?
Yep.
But anyway, I think Randy Orton's going to win if this is Jericho's indeed last match. And I think it's interesting that it's Randy Orton that he chose. I feel like he would choose someone like that if it was going to be his last match. And I think Jericho's the type of guy who goes out on his back. So I say that Randy Orton wins.
Yeah, pretty much. I think Jericho's going to not win the match. Definitely going to make Randy come out looking strong. And I think this really has the potential to be the match of the night if they give it, some time, considering it may be his last match. So finally, main event time. We got WWE World Heavyweight Championship. The champion Brock Lesnar defending against B. John Cena. B. Keith. Be your what choice?
I choose you, Brock Lesnar, a chew. And if John Cena, this is kind of the ongoing theme here. But if John Cena wins, just no, 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 bad.
If John Cena wins, we know.
I'm going to go with Brock Lesnar on this one. If John Cena wins, I will eat an entire bar of baking chocolate and I will put it up on the YouTube channel.
Are you sure that's chocolate?
It's sexual, lady. No, so I agree. I think everybody expects Brock Lesnar to win. So Mr. Lesnar is probably going to dominate Cena. I see him getting maybe a couple of moves, but that's about it. So that's Night of Champions. We'll talk.
How many German suplexes do you think there are going to be?
I wonder if Bovada's doing an over-under on German suplexes.
Wow.
Gonna set it to, probably gonna be set to like 9.5.
I'm gonna set it to Wombo on that one.
And I'd take the over.
So speaking of Wombo.
And speaking of setting it to Wombo,
it's time for this week's Tweet of the Week.
All right, guys, I'm going to need your help with something here. I'm trying to remember something. What was the name of Val Venus's finishing move?
I don't know, but it's money shot time.
That's right. Just like the dive from the sky, it's money shot time. And this week's Tweet of the Week is brought to you by Carissa Hadlock on Twitter. That's at Carissa, CO_H. This week's Tweet of the Week is, don't trust people who dislike tacos. They're probably not human.
Tweet of the Week. Thank you, Keith, for that money shot worthy Tweet of the Week. Remember, you can send us a tweet at Byte That Cast. We tweet during Raw and other wrestling events, and even when you are sleeping, we are still alive. And also remember to check out our YouTube channel.
We usually don't tweet when you're sleeping.
No.
Unless you sleep during the day. Then, yeah, I guess we do.
That's a possibility. So remember to check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Byte That Cast. Ryan and myself have been having some fun in WWE 2K14 with something we call Byte Night. And by Byte Night, I mean Fight Night. I should know the name of the thing we do. Which is where we sort of play online and commentate and post that. So we've been having a lot of fun this week. We continue that tradition. That video is going to be up this Thursday. And remember, on weekends, Ryan, he always brings up some very nice discussion and or wrestling news. You never know what you're going to get. So Ryan's kind of like a box of chocolates. He'll make you die, become diabetic, and he's just there. Right there.
Are you sure those are chocolates?
I don't know, man. Anything's possible. Oh, no, man. No. Okay. So having said that, we got the WWE Raw and Night of Champions portion of the show over with. However, something that happened last week we do need to bring up is NXT Takeover II Fatal 4-Way. So this was one of WWE's quarterly, I guess you could say, NXT's mega events, where instead of having a 1-hour tape show, they have a 2-hour live show. We got a fatal 4-way main event between Adrian Neville, Sami Zayn, Tyler Breeze, and Tyson Kidd for the championship, where Adrian Neville retained. However, just a lot of stuff happened. We got an awesome Divas match, so I wanted to get your overall reactions from the show. So going over to you first, Keith. What'd you think of it?
So let's see if you pick up what I put down here. But I think TakeOver was so good that it actually hurt the WWE product overall. Because how is something like Night of Champions, where we're just kind of about it, supposed to hold a single candle to how great that show was?
I think it's just the hunger factor. Because, you can tell everybody's just trying to be the best that they can. Even as going as far back as the Enzo Amore match, which wasn't really much of a match. It was more of an entertaining spectacle, but it was still cool. So what do you think, Ryan? What you think of TakeOver?
It was an excellent show, definitely. To kind of touch on what Keith said is, it's its own complete separate entity that the other writing, the Raw writing team, SmackDown writing team have nothing to do with it. So that's probably a big reason why it can be so refreshing to watch.
But it's still a WWE product, and by that alone, it gets compared to other WWE products.
Yes, and I think it's a lot of times NXT is the best wrestling show most weeks of the year. But like I said, I think the reason it feels so fresh and can outshine Raw and things is because it's it's a different group of people working on it.
Now, Mr. McNulty, you did a video that you can find at youtube.com/ByteThatCast a couple weeks ago about how Vince might be losing his touch. Do you think this kind of shows that off a little bit? How like Triple H's baby is NXT and it's so gosh darn good. And then there's the WWE product, which is Vince's baby, that's kind of lackluster at the moment.
Well, I'll say something real quick and then I'll actually talk about the show because I know we're kind of drifting off. But definitely this gives me confidence in Triple H's ability to run a wrestling show. But like I've said before, with NXT, they don't have the same restrictions from TV networks and sponsors and, all this pressure from everything and a bigger roster to run and all this. There's a lot more of a burden to running Monday Night Raw than there is to NXT. So that can be a big reason why a lot of times the show will suffer, where NXT is very free to kind of do what they want and experiment. And since it's developmental, they can, do things just like change a gimmick one week to the next. So anyway, getting into the actual show now, I thought it was an excellent show. There was a lot of cool things, just, things like Baron Corbin just out of nowhere being awesome and just, destroying, I can't even, CJ Parker. That's it. I got it. Even though I like CJ Parker's new gimmick. But anyway, like you said, Enzo, his match wasn't the greatest wrestling match, but it was, great entertainment. And then, the women's match was great, told a great story. I thought Bayley showed a lot in this match. Both of them showed a lot. And, of course, the Fatal 4-Way, absolutely phenomenal. Far and away the best thing on the show. Main event really delivered. And I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about the psychology of the Fatal 4-Way, because I thought it was very refreshing. Very refreshing. In the way that there actually was a strategy. Tyson Kidd legitimately had a strategy in this match that you saw actually happen that you normally don't see. Normally it's, two guys in the ring, they fight, one guy gets thrown out, another guy comes in, they fight again. But what did you guys think of Tyson Kidd legitimately isolating a guy in the ring, trying to keep Neville out? Like, it actually made strategic sense in a match, which you normally don't see. So what did you guys think of that?
I think it was an excellent match, and the psychology aspect was amazing because, with Tyson Kidd, the man has progressed incredibly. I mean, from going from somebody with basically no charisma to having this whole fact thing, his wrestling is exceptional, and him being a heel definitely plays into a benefit for him. So I think that was really good. However, the psychology or sort of the inside feud that I really liked about that match was Adrian Neville and Sami Zayn, because they didn't touch each other until like over halfway into the match. They teased it a lot, but even there was one point where Sami Zayn was going to dive to the outside, so then Adrian Neville interrupts him and then does a moonsault.
Sick spot.
Yeah, and like the facial expressions from both men just told such a great story, where it's like they're friends, but they're just like they want to beat the crap out of each other.
And then that whole thing made the finish that much more impactful, where it was this whole thing that was based on honor and may the best men win. And then Adrian Neville comes along and uses heel tactics to cost Sami Zayn the match.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, and that doesn't necessarily mean, Adrian Neville's turning heel or whatever, but it just shows that, he had to, desperate times call for desperate measures, so he had to do something to ensure that he won the match. And it's like, Adrian Neville isn't this big heel now, but you understand why he did it, and it's kind of like, you might, I don't know. It invoked emotion, and
it was character development.
Exactly. And you actually felt like it wasn't just this choreographed match. Like, it felt like everything they did made sense. And that's what I really liked about it.
Yeah, and it showed that he was a human being. Because otherwise we get these perfect guys that they would never do something like that. But here's a champion that's coming very close to losing the championship, and he's retained a bunch of times. So I think very few people actually expected him to retain. So when he did, it actually worked because people were kayfabe sort of disappointed in the match because they were actually upset at Adrian Neville, who's a great wrestler, a great babyface, and he did that. So guess what? They actually got the audience to react how they wanted to. And it's just the little things. Like at some point during the show, they were going to start a CM Punk chant in the crowd, and you could see the other side of the crowd just telling them, like, no, that's not happening here. It's those little things. It's that cult following. That it sounds weird because it's from WWE, but WWE has created a breeding ground, which is exactly what NXT is supposed to be, that can effectively become better than even Raw or SmackDown because of that. You can invest. It feels more personal. Kind of like when we had these guys on the tag team match on Raw. It was like a friend sort of showing up. The last thing I want to talk quickly about TakeOver is Charlotte in particular. I think Charlotte, a couple of months ago, I was kind of like meh about her, but man, she has stepped up her game in the best way possible. Even that ending to the match, when Bayley kicked out, and then you could see her struggling, and then Charlotte's like, nah, and then just hits her finisher, and then 1, 2, 3. It's little things like that. Like, what do you think about the psychology and most importantly, the conclusion of that match?
I thought it was an excellent match, and like you said, just these matches really evoking a lot more emotion than what I'm seeing on, WWE's standard programming. In the characters, you feel what's going on in the match, and I think that's the most important thing is they make you feel something, and that's why this show is probably best wrestling show in quite a while.
So talking about NXT, who do you think's actually going to get called up now? We have this whole tag team match thing. There was a rumor that there was going to be another match on Raw. Obviously, that was not the case. So, given all this stuff, given the fact that they may be cross-promoting NXT, who's next?
I think it's the Ascension that's next. I mean, going by the law of if you drop the titles, that's your cue to go up. The Ascension fit into that perfectly. But I think not only are they ready and they can bring something where they're at, but the WWE kind of needs them. They need that tag team to just come in and dominate.
Can no one get called up and they just pay these guys more? I mean, we saw what happened to Bo Dallas, and it doesn't seem like they really care too much about him. And it's funny. I think we're gonna see a lot more of guys getting called up, and a lot of them not being as awesome as maybe they were in NXT. So it's kind of like a bittersweet thing when people get called up. If I was going to guess, I would agree with Keith, and I would say it would probably be the Ascension, especially with them losing the belts. But, pay these guys more and keep them on NXT. I mean, you got to keep that show looking great, too.
Exactly, and I agree. I think the Ascension are going to be called up, and I think the biggest problem is when you have different writers take on different shows. Say Ryan's writing Raw, Keith is writing SmackDown, and Keith doesn't always watch the other show. What happens when you get these new wrestler? You go like, okay, I'll throw him somewhere in there.
I mean, I think Bo Dallas is the perfect example of this because Bo Dallas on the current WWE product is not Bo Dallas in NXT. Like, there's kind of shades of it, but the things he did were completely different than just shilling Bo Leave everywhere.
And also someone like Adam Rose. I mean, he had a cool thing going with Leo Kruger. They switched to Adam Rose. It got a great crowd reaction, but they never let that develop on NXT. And they just shot him up there, and now they've already given up on him. And, Bo Dallas is a guy who they just kind of gave up on. And even then, which is surprising because I felt like they gave up on Bo Dallas, but the crowd was actually, the Monday Night Raw crowd was reacting to Bo Dallas. They cared about Bo Dallas, whether they hated him or they liked him. They actually gave up on someone the audience was liking.
It's a very sad thing because, as you brought up, Ryan, can we get excited for somebody getting called up? Imagine Tyler Breeze, somebody whose gimmick I love in NXT, and then just getting called up, and they do nothing with that. They do nothing with those little things that they know he can do, but maybe the writer doesn't keep up. Maybe whoever's behind the scenes that makes his segments happen just doesn't really know what to do with them.
I mean, for the most part, when somebody gets called up, even the Wyatt family, this happened to, but there's always that 6 months to a year where they're in the mid card or the lower card building their way up. And a lot of people just get straight up lost in that and don't make it anywhere else.
A.K.A. Xavier Woods.
Exactly. And Biggie Langston.
And Emma. I mean, the list can go on. With the exception of Bray Wyatt, Seth Rollins doesn't even count because Seth Rollins in WWE...
They're FCW, really.
Exactly. And even then, when he was the first NXT champion, he was a completely different character. He was babyface, wearing tights. Next night on Raw, he wears the riot gear. So it's very sad. Let us know, for those listening, let us know who you would like to see in NXT getting called up, and who would you be most concerned about getting called up. So before we close out the show, as always, we like to bring up the Twitter questions we get from all of you that tune into the show. So Keith, what do you got for us this week?
Well, one, I got 2 questions, and before I go any further, I'm trying to say, thank you once again for the questions. We love it. We love you. There's just love for everyone. So the first question is from Brian, friend of the show at Brelo Light. If you could add any match to Sunday's Night of Champions card, what would it be?
This is actually a tough one because I'm trying to think of anyone on the roster who doesn't have a match that I'd really like to see a match from. I'll add something of I'd like to see that Biggie Langston, Kofi Kingston, Xavier Rhodes faction in another 6-man tag match, whether it's someone like
Xavier Woods, right?
What did I say?
Xavier Rhodes.
Who's actually a football player. There's a football player called Xavier Rhodes. So that I must be in fantasy football mode right now. So Xavier Woods, Biggie Langston, Kofi Kingston, their faction apparently might still be alive on the house shows. But anyway, put them in a 6-man tag match against anybody. Doesn't matter, Matadors and the Bull, who cares? I'd want to see them.
Now, for me, I got to bring up the NXT stuff. I mean, what better way to showcase or promote NXT than to have the pay-per-view or the network event? You got Brock Lesnar, Cena, so a lot of people are going to be having their eyes on this show. And, with the whole network being renewed, what better way to make an incentive than to have these guys that you can tune into every single week on Thursday nights, and you sort of have them being showcased.
We can't talk this week.
No.
Yeah, it's getting to that point where it's becoming a struggle, but I think my answer would be the Wyatt family. I would like to see them not added in a match, but inserted into a match, just because I loved the Usos versus Harper and Rowan beforehand. I really loved the Usos and Harper and Rowan beforehand, so to have like a triple threat tag team match, maybe even elimination between Star and Goldust, the Usos, and the Wyatt family would be a pretty sick match. But with the current roster, there's not really a lot to go off of right now, but thank you for your question. Now, the second question is from Keith at twitter.com/ByteThatCast. The question is, what moment in wrestling history made you mark out the hardest? Now, I'll go first on this one, and it kind of complements my Slammy. You know that award that I won? My Slammy? You know the one?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we hear about it.
So, I was at that Raw that Dolph Ziggler cashed in his Money in the Bank. And I was part of that crowd where everybody was losing their flipping mind during that moment. It's the exact moment that I remember the most fond is when it was the pinfall that won him the title, and everybody was going like 1, 2, 3. That was probably my favorite moment in wrestling history, just because I was there.
For me, it's pretty easy. Obviously, there's a lot of great moments that have happened, but one that in particular, while I was actually watching it as it happened, had to be Edge cashing in the Money in the Bank for the first time. That always kind of go down as a great, unpredictable moment. I remember watching it with my cousin and some friends, and someone actually was calling it, and I didn't believe them. And we'd all been so tired of Cena's title reign. And then for Edge to just come out after the Elimination Chamber, we hadn't seen anything like that before. And to just spear Cena twice, 1, 2, 3, just an amazing moment. One of the coolest things, and just there was a buzz after that. And, I couldn't wait to see what would happen on Raw. So really, really cool time.
For me, it has to be WrestleMania 28. I went there with Keith, and just the Undertaker
right.
Triple H Hell in a Cell match. Not just do you get to see Undertaker's entrance at WrestleMania, which, I mean, it gives you goosebumps. It gives you... It makes you remember exactly why you are a wrestling fan. And then the actual match itself. You know, there were a lot of people around us, Keith, that we didn't know. But for that time being, they were like our best friends. We'd be yelling it with them.
Yeah, we all bonded together through wrestling.
Exactly.
At that moment.
And like when there were near pinfalls, the fact that we were all just going like, oh, you know, that type of stuff. Like you get immersed into the experience.
The moment it was the super kick into the pedigree on the Undertaker.
Exactly.
And then we thought it was it, and it wasn't, and then we lost our shit. I remember that.
It's got to be the biggest no-sell in wrestling history.
No kidding.
No, and the fact that when that match concluded, we all hugged each other. Like just a bunch of people that we don't know who each other are, you know? We all just hugged it out. It's like, you know what? It's freaking wrestling, so why not? So thank you for that question, Keith Poshik, a friend of the show, fan of the show. And you know what? I'm going to make him...
Hold on.
What?
Back the truck up. Did we hug?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, man.
I don't remember this.
Or maybe you did because you're antisocial or something, but I did. I hugged everybody.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be darned. Okay.
He was like Bailey out there, just hugging people.
Juani's gonna hug you. Yeah, so thank you, Keith, for that amazing question. So I think we've had a pretty good show talking about Night of Champions. Remember, for everything we commented, for everything we talked about, you can definitely leave us a comment on the Twitter or on our YouTube video. So, Mr. McNulty, take us home.
All right, well, we want to thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of Byte That, but before you go, just a few quick plugs as always. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ByteThatCast. We've got a video coming up this Thursday, which is me and Juan facing off once again in WWE 2K14. That is what we call Fight Night. We're going to be using 2 different created superstars, so you don't want to miss that. It's always a good time. This Saturday, I'll actually be doing a video on WWE 2K15. The release date was actually changed, and there's a few details with achievements and things that I'll be going over. Don't forget to always follow us on Twitter at ByteThatCast. Leave us a tweet. We answer questions on the show, so you can always send us a question anytime during the week. So, thank you for listening once again, and we will see you next week.